The drunk Pete Hegseth just called the men responsible for the Wounded Knee massacre soldiers. Over 230 Lakota Sioux people, mostly women and children, were slaughtered in 1890 after their fighters had already surrendered. Did you get that? To a deranged drunk who likes to little unarmed boats? I can understand that cowardice is considered bravery. The drunk also announced that these soldiers would get to keep their medals, framing it as historically correct, which is rich coming from a guy who thinks Bunker Hill is a winery. This isn't history, it's revisionism. There's no honor in glorifying war crimes, and all he's doing is setting the stage for future atrocities.
Under the previous administration, a review panel was convened to determine whether soldiers awarded the Medal of Honor for their actions at the Battle of Wounded Knee should keep their medals. Now, upon deliberation, that panel concluded that these brave soldiers should, in fact, rightfully keep their medals from actions in 1890. The report was concluded in October of 2024. Yet, despite this clear recommendation, former Secretary Lloyd Austin, for whatever reason, I think we know he was more interested in being politically correct than historically correct, chose not to make a final decision. Such careless inaction has allowed for their distinguished recognition to remain in limbo until now. Under my direction, we're making it clear without hesitation that the soldiers who fought in the Battle of Wounded Knee in 1890 will keep their medals. And we're making it clear that they deserve those medals. This decision is now final, and their place in our nation's history is no longer up for debate. We salute their memory, we honor their service, and we will never forget what they did.
Hi, so if you haven't seen this video by Pete Hegseth talking about how the soldiers that participated in the Battle of Wounded Knee are going to keep their medals, and you don't know why that's super insane, let me explain. For those of you who don't know, the Battle of Wounded Knee was not a battle. Okay, it was a massacre. The Lakota tribe at the time of the massacre had about 300 people in the tribe, and the majority of those people were women and children. Unarmed women and children. And when the army surrounded the tribe, they had Hutchkiss guns pointed at the tribe. If you don't know what that is, it's basically the original Gatling gun. It didn't put out as many as the modern ones, but it was like the original kind of Gatling gun. And again, these weapons were pointed and used against innocent women and children. The very few Lakota warriors they had very few weapons and very little ammunition. They didn't have the ability to fight back anymore. That's why they didn't. The majority of the casualties on the US military side was because of friendly fire, because they shot indiscriminately into the crowd, hitting both innocent women and children and also their own soldiers. On top of all of this, the Lakota people were starving and freezing. They had run out of resources. They had lost everything. They didn't have anything to fight back with. They were returning to the reservation because they had nothing left. So for our Secretary of War to say that this was a battle is a complete misunderstanding of the situation, because what it actually was a U.S. military opening fire on unarmed women and children. And the Lakota warriors that got hit were freezing, did not have enough weapons, and weren't even fighting back. So no, Pete Hegseth, it was not a battle. Those men do not deserve medals. It was cold-blooded execution of unarmed women and children, and they were all thrown in a mass grave afterwards.
So the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, recently stated that the soldiers that earned Medals of Honor at Wounded Knee will keep them. The thing is, when you understand what Wounded Knee realistically was, it becomes incredibly clear that what this is awarding medals for genocide. There's a lot to be said about U.S. colonization and westward expansion in particular, this horrific genocidal process in which indigenous peoples were attacked, starved, put into reservations and concentration camps, and systematically annihilated through U.S. policy. That being said, it is important to note that U.S. colonization and indigenous genocide isn't like something of the past. It's not some historical point in time. It's a process that is continuing today. That being said, you have to understand that in regards to Wounded Knee, it is really grotesque that people got Medals of Honor at all, and is really even more grotesque that they continue to keep them as a part of the historical record. That's because Wounded Knee was a massacre, right? U.S. cavalry members surrounded a camp of indigenous Lakota people, set up military equipment and positions around the camp, and then set about systematically slaughtering hundreds of people. The camp that was attacked, the Metaconju camp, was en route to Pine Ridge, right? These were men, women, and children just going from one place to another who were surrounded, attempted to be disarmed, and once many of them had been disarmed, were then fired upon and slaughtered. What that means is that when the US government gave soldiers medals of honor for their participation in that massacre, they were celebrating an act of genocide, right? They were rewarding the soldiers. It's worth thinking about that in a lot of ways, this is very similar to how Israeli occupational soldiers, after they commit genocide in Gaza, are oftentimes revered and celebrated by so many in their own communities as well. Now, is stripping the men that earned those medals going to be adequate justice for those who endured the horrific realities of US settler colonialism and genocide? No. But it is something that we should just be doing because it's the right thing to do. That being said, for people like Pete Hegseth and the Trump administration, indigenous genocide is not something they care about, so it's not really surprising that these are the efforts they're making. Similar, again, to Palestine, it is very clear that the United States government does not give a damn about indigenous peoples, especially not the ones it is occupying and has spent decades colonizing and dispossessing. But yeah, something worth thinking about, I think. As always, Assalamu alaikum, and have a great day.
Under my direction, we're making it clear without hesitation that the soldiers who fought in the Battle of Wounded Knee in 1890 will keep their medals. And we're making it clear that they deserve those medals. This decision is now final, and their place in our nation's history is no longer up for debate. We salute their memory, we honor their service, and we will never forget what they did.
Hey there, everybody. That was Pete Hegseth, the so-called Secretary of War, formerly the Secretary of Defense, declaring that the soldiers from the Wounded Knee Massacre that were awarded the Medal of Honor are going to keep their medals because, according to Pete Hegseth, that those medals were well-deserved and that those soldiers will never be forgotten. You know, it's taken me a couple of days to process this because he came out with that statement 2 days ago. As a veteran myself, as a Native American, Cheyenne and Arapaho, it's really hard to process the understanding that someone like Pete Hegseth could make, knowing that that was not a battle. That so-called battle, as he called it, which Native Americans referred to as nothing more than a massacre because that's what it was, consisted of between 200 and 300 Native Americans. 2/3 of them were women and children. Yeah, that's right. These soldiers who killed these Native Americans, according to Pete Hegseth, in which they earned it, they deserved it, they're going to keep their Medal of Honor medals, killed women and children. Let's keep in mind, this occurred on December 29th, 1890. Has anybody ever been in South Dakota during the dead middle of winter? Those Lakota people, those Native American men, women, and children were merely trying to survive wintertime at the time that their encampment was surrounded by, guess who? The 7th Cavalry. This occurred 14 years after the Battle of the Little Bighorn, July of 1876, in which Lakota, Cheyenne, Arapaho, Dakota destroyed the 7th Cavalry and General Custer. So who knows, maybe this was somewhat of a revenge party on the 7th Cavalry to make themselves feel good about going in the dead set of wintertime surrounding an encampment of mostly women and children and a lot of elder men. Very few soldiers, very few warriors were in that camp. But nonetheless, that 7th Cavalry was directed to do what they were well known to do at that time, which is to basically murder Native American men, women, and children. They chased them down in the snow, the women and children that ran off as far as a mile away, and they still killed them. I don't understand how someone like this so-called Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, could stand up there with a straight face and tell the American people that those soldiers are keeping their medals because they deserve them. If myself, as a veteran who served in Iraq during Operation Iraqi Freedom, if we were to go into an Iraqi camp and were to have killed people in the same manner that the 7th Cavalry killed the Lakota people at the Wounded Knee Massacre, I would be serving a life in prison for committing that war crime. But yet, Pete Hegseth is telling us that those same soldiers that committed those murders in the Wounded Knee Massacre deserve their Medal of Honor medals. It's a sad day for our country. It's a sad day the direction this country is taking, because it's become very abundantly clear what they are about. Not only are they trying to erase the negative history of the United States, starting with the Navajo Code Talkers, which they tried to take down, the Tuskegee Airmen, right? They're going in and they're trying to whitewash the Smithsonian museums in Washington, D.C., because they don't want a negative view of this country's past dark history to be shown to the world when they come in. But Native Americans, this is the importance of striving for true tribal sovereignty, of creating, building, maintaining our own museums, because we will not let the true history die out. We will not let people like Pete Hegseth decide and determine our history. The Lions can now read and write. The Lions now hold law degrees and are scholars. And we will write our own history. We will keep our past atrocities that were committed against us alive so that they are not repeated again. I don't have much more to say because there's not really much more to say on this topic. Anyway, please share and repost. I appreciate all of you guys that continue to follow me. All right. Ho-ho.
On December 29, 1890, more than 200 Sioux men, women, and children were massacred by U.S. troops in an event that would be known as the Battle of Wounded Knee. Here are 5 facts about one of America's darkest events. Throughout the 1890s, the United States government was worried about the increasing influence at the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation of the ghost dance spiritual movement. This movement taught that Native Americans had been defeated and confined to the reservations because they had angered gods by abandoning their traditional customs. Many of the Sioux believed that if they practiced the ghost dance and rejected the ways of the white man, the gods would create the world anew and destroy all non-believers. On December 15, 1890, reservation police tried to arrest the Sioux chief Sitting Bull, believing him to be a ghost dancer. He is killed in the process, and tensions at Pine Ridge reach a boiling point. Army leaders wanted the ghost dance to stop, so they ordered the arrest of Chief Bigfoot and demanded that all weapons be confiscated. Chief Bigfoot ordered his men to comply, but Black Coyote, who was deaf, could not understand what the American troops wanted him to do. Troops went to grab Black Coyote from behind, and his gun went off. What happened next was a nightmare. A brutal massacre followed. Over 200 Native men, women, and children were killed. The U.S. cavalry would lose 25 men. The Bureau of Indian Affairs portrayed the event as a battle, but many of the eyewitnesses claimed that it was indeed a massacre. But there was no federal investigation into the event, and 20 U.S. cavalrymen would receive the Medal of Honor. In 2021, the House of Representatives introduced a bill to rescind each Medal of Honor awarded at Wounded Knee.
To be a white man, all you have to be concerned about is money and possessions and the pleasures, what he terms pleasures of life, when he doesn't realize that here lies the pleasure, the life that's around us, these green things which are our relatives, this grass, the things that grow, all living things which are our relatives. But the white man sees that he has to manipulate and exploit all these things so that he can have pleasure, self-pleasure. It's complete selfishness. And so this is what that old man meant when the hardest thing today is to be an Indian. It's so easy to go out and get a job and become concerned only with money. And then you start building fences around your house. And you start building fences around your cities. And you start building fences around your states. You start building fences around your country. And all this time you're building only a fence around yourself.